Hello and welcome everyone to this edition of Blogging Theology. And today I have a very special guest, Shaykh Hasan Somali. Salam alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
The Shaykh is currently in Philadelphia, so it's good morning to you. And it's late afternoon here, Maghrib time approximately, in London. And I'm just going to introduce Shaykh Hasan Somali very briefly, and then we'll get to the subject of this meeting. So Shaykh Hasan Somali is Imam of Germantown Masjid in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA. And he studied with many senior scholars in Yemen. And he's also translated and compiled many published works relating to Islamic jurisprudence, such as prayer and fasting, creed, hadith, and social matters pertaining to the family and other areas. Now, he last appeared on Blogging Theology back in June when he talked about the truth about Salafis, because there's quite a bit of misapprehension and even fake news about Salafis going around. That's a worthwhile video, actually. If you haven't seen it already, do go and watch that. Perhaps I'll link to it in the description below. But today, Shaykh Hasan has kindly returned to explain to us a crucial concept in Islam, Tawheed. Now, the Christian Nicene Creed begins, I believe in one God. So, Shaykh, how is Tawheed different from this profession of faith? What is Tawheed?
Thanks for having me, Paul, for this very important and beneficial discussion. Then Tawheed is a verbal noun that comes from the word wahada yuwahidu tawheeda. It means to assert oneness. In the Islamic sense, when Muslims say Tawheed, then it is to affirm and believe in the unique lordship of Allah, the unique lordship of God, his unique names and attributes, and his unique and exclusive right to be worshipped alone. And if we were to open the Quran and read Surah Al-Baqarah, then I have a copy here of the Noble Quran.
So do I.
Verse number 21.
Okay.
Ya ayyuhan nasu u'budu rabbakum. O mankind, worship your Lord, alladhi khalaqakum walladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. Worship your Lord who created you and created those who came before you, so that you may attain piety, so that you may be pious. Because Tawheed is the foundation of piety. And then we find clear proofs establishing the right of Allah, the right of God to be worshipped alone. He said, الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ فِرَاشًا وَالسَّمَاءَ بِنَاءً وَأَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَأَخْرَجَ بِهِ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ رِزْقًا لَكُمْ فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. So worship Allah, who has made the earth a resting place for you, the sky as a canopy, and sent down water, rain from the sky, and brought forth with this water fruit and vegetation. Do not set up rivals to Allah, whilst you know that He alone has the right to be worshipped. So this is clear in clarifying the meaning of a Tawheed. To single out Allah, to single out God with his unique lordship, his unique names and attributes, and his unique and exclusive right to be worshipped alone. So this in essence is the message of every prophet and every messenger that was sent by God. And as you said, the message of Jesus and every other prophet was to worship God alone without any partners, which is a very simple concept. However, sadly, man, for various reasons and motives, have deviated from this over time.
So just to clarify, when Christians say they believe, as they do in the Nicene Creed, recited virtually all Christian services, certainly in the Catholic Church and many other churches every Sunday, I believe in one God, they don't quite mean the same thing as the Islamic concept of God, which is Tawheed. So what is the difference? So Tawheed doesn't permit the idea of multiple personalities and multiple divinities within God, does it?
Like you said, yes, there's a big difference. To say I believe in one God is affirmation of lordship. However, to practically worship a prophet, or to worship an idol, or to worship an angel is shirk, which is polytheism according to Muslims, and that is the gravest crime. A proof of that in the Quran, Surah Al-Ikhlas, and some of the scholars of Islam refer to it as Surah Al-Tawheed. Allah said, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, say He is Allah the One, Allahu Samad, the self-sufficient Master. لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ, He begets not, nor was He begotten. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, and there is none equal or comparable to Him. So Tawheed, yes, we believe in one God, but it requires us also to worship God alone, because there is the Creator, God, and the created, everything besides Him. And there's a famous statement which is very simple: الخالق لهذه الأشياء هو المستحق للعبادة. The one who created everything, because Allah is the creator of everything, is the one who deserves to be worshipped alone without any partners. And the pagan Arabs, when Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was sent to them, they believed in God. They believed in Allah. In the verses in the Quran, there are clear verses. If you ask them who created the heavens and the earth, they would say Allah. So they believed in God's lordship. However, they associate partners with God as it pertained to worship. And this is why when Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings, was sent to them, he invited them to Tawheed, to worship God alone and to not associate any partners. And that is why in Islam, the gravest crime is a shirk, which is ibadatu ghayrillah, to worship other than Allah, to worship other than God. And that is the one sin and the one crime that will not be forgiven. For example, there's a verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah when Allah, He said, لَقَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْمَسِيحُ ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ. Surely they have disbelieved those who say that Allah is Jesus, the son of Mary. وَقَالَ الْمَسِيحُ, but Jesus actually said His original call, and you find this in some places in the Bible when it hasn't been distorted. You know, children of Israel, you know, your God is one God. And Jesus said to them, O children of Israel, اعبدوا الله ربي وربكم, worship your Lord, worship Allah, your Lord and my Lord. إنه من يشرك بالله, for verily whoever associates partners with Allah, whoever associates partners with God, so whoever worships a celestial body, the sun or the moon or the stars, whoever worships another human being, whether it be a saint or other than that, whoever worships trees and stones, whoever worships angels, إنه من يشرك بالله, whoever associates partners with God, فقد حرم الله عليه الجنة, then God will prevent them from entering paradise. ومأواه النار, and their abode will be the hellfire. وما للظالمين من أنصار, and there are no helpers for the wrongdoers, meaning the polytheists, those who associate partners with God. And like I said, if you look at, again, I'm not a Christian scholar, but I've familiarized myself with some of the passages in the Bible. Deuteronomy 6:4, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. This is similar to قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ that we find in Surah Al-Ikhlas.
Exactly. Isn't it the same word? The word echad in Hebrew and the word achad in
Ahad, yes, one.
Arabic is exactly the same word. So it's almost as if the Quran is reaffirming the Shema of Israel. As you say, hear Israel, the Lord our God is one. And of course, Israel's monotheism didn't include a Trinity. It was, and is that not the very verse that in the New Testament, in Mark's Gospel, that Jesus is reputed to have cited when he was asked what is the greatest commandment, and he recites Deuteronomy 6:4, which is affirmed in the Quran itself.
It's the same meaning. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Like you said, Qul huwa Allahu ahad, because in the Bible, again, there are passages where Jesus, he said that he came to confirm the commandments. To confirm the commandments would necessitate to worship one God. It was unheard of that any prophet prior to Jesus came and called man to worship them or claim divinity or claim to be the Son of God. This is something that was distorted and was claimed by adherents later on. However, like you said, the original message of Jesus was, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And that is actually confirmation of the commandments, an emphasis of the foundation of Islam. And Islam, Paul, as you probably know, Islam in the general sense, because some people misunderstand this. And they think Islam is specifically the laws and the regulations that are practiced by Muslims today. However, in the general sense, yes, that's Islam in a specific sense. In the general sense, Islam is the worship of God alone without any partners. And that was the religion of every prophet. That is why we have verses in the Quran of other prophets saying, and I am from the Muslims. Because a Muslim is someone who worships God alone and does not associate partners with him. Because Islam, the meaning of Islam is al-istislam lillahi bit-tawheed, to surrender to God with a tawheed, by affirming his lordship, by affirming his beautiful names and attributes, and affirming his sole right to worship alone. And that is why every prophet of God was a Muslim. And any person who worships God the way that the prophets taught them to worship God is a Muslim. And obviously, after the sending of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, a person likewise has to believe in the messengership and the prophethood of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him.
Can I just deal with one objection that Christian missionaries sometimes bring forth? Even today, I read it on Twitter a few days ago, where one Christian missionary said, the word Tawheed is not in the Quran. So how can you preach this doctrine? It's not even in the Quran, he claimed. I'm not advancing this as a terribly serious point because I'm aware of the response, but I just wanted to get it out there, at least so you can deal with it. So
I mean, the word
Tawheed is not in the Quran. So, how do we deal with that?
The response is simple. Rather, we would say the whole of the Quran is Tawheed, as mentioned by Al-Imam Ibn Al-Qayyim, the honorable student of Shaykh al-Islam. The whole of the Quran is a clarification of a Tawheed, not just the word being mentioned itself. Because Tawheed, as we said, is to affirm the unique lordship of Allah, the unique lordship of God, his unique names and attributes, and his sole right to be worshipped alone, and to affirm this and implement it in one's life. This is the whole of the Quran. And the verse I mentioned for you in Surah Al-Baqarah, when you open the Quran, that is what we find. Likewise, Surah Al-Fatiha. If we were to just ponder and reflect, the opening surah of the Quran, the surah that every Muslim recites in every rak'ah, every unit of their prayer. Every prayer, 5 times a day. It starts, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise belongs to Allah, to God, the Lord of all of the creation. Now this is known as Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, affirming lordship for God alone. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the compassionate, the bestower of mercy, affirming names and attributes for Allah, that God has unique names and attributes. He has beautiful names and his attributes are perfect. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, the sole possessor and owner of the day of judgment. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim, guide us to the straight path. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. This is the ayah that I wanted to highlight. You alone we worship, and you alone we seek help and aid from. So you alone we worship is Tawheed. You alone we seek aid from is Tawheed. Because this is the meaning of a Tawheed. And that is why I have, for example, with me, Sahih al-Bukhari, as you can see. Al-Bukhari, he died in the year 256 Hijri. And he has in his book a chapter, Kitab al-Tawheed. And the first hadith that he brings under a subchapter, Babu ma ja'a fi du'a an-nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ummatahu ila at-tawheed illahi tabaraka wa ta'ala. That which the Prophet invited his nation to, as it relates to the Tawheed of Allah, to single out Allah alone without any partners. The first hadith he mentions is the hadith that لما بعث النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم معاذا نحو اليمن. When the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he sent Mu'adh to Yemen, to the direction of Yemen. فقال له, he said to him, إنك تقدم على قوم من أهل الكتاب. You are going to a people of the book. فليكن أول ما تدعوهم إلى أن يوحدوا الله تعالى. Let the first thing that you invite them to be the Tawheed of Allah, to single out Allah alone without any worship. And in some versions of this hadith, Paul, it mentions إلى عبادة الله. Invite them to worship Allah alone. So we see, to call someone to worship Allah alone, ibadatullahi, likewise the Tawheed, these are synonymous terms.
Yeah.
These are synonymous. Prophet ﷺ said, فَلْيَكُنْ أَوَّلَ مَا تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَىٰ أَنْ يُوَحِّدُ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى. Let the first thing that you invite them to be the Tawheed of Allah. فَإِذَا عَرَفُوا ذَلِكَ, and if they accept this, then tell them that Allah has made, God has placed upon them 5 prayers to the end of the hadith. And this chapter in this chapter in Bukhari, Kitab al-Tawheed, another benefit as well is that this word Tawheed was known to Muslim scholars more than 1,000 years ago, and it was utilized by them. And actually, as we said, it was known at the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. That is the message of the Quran. But likewise, Al-Bukhari in this chapter, it is called Kitab al-Tawheed, and in some versions, manuscripts, وَالرَّدْ عَلَى الْجَهْمِيَّةِ, a refutation upon the Jahmiyyah, a deviant sect that appeared and ascribed to Islam. But it was also to refute the false notion of Jahm ibn Safwan. And from that, one of the beliefs of Jahm was that, unity of existence, or everything is God and God is everything. And Bukhari actually mentioned this chapter in his authentic collection to clarify the disbelief of, pantheism or unity of existence or any other heretical belief, because the belief of Tawheed is that we believe in God. He is our Lord. He is the one that we worship alone without any partners. And to say that the creation and God are one, that is disbelief as well in itself.
Because there are some perhaps more extreme Sufi thinkers or groups that have used or appear to use the language of the unity of existence, or almost a kind of pantheism or panentheism, which clearly you're suggesting is contrary to the teaching of the Quran and the Hadith in Bukhari there.
No doubt, because it's the same way, Paul, that we believe that Christians distorted the message of Jesus. And this is something that has happened. And Muslims believe that this is an historical fact, which can't be debated. Otherwise, you cannot be a Muslim. And likewise, man has tried and will try to distort the true message of Islam. But it's impossible when someone just takes time to ponder and reflect upon the verses in the Quran and to reflect upon the Sunnah, the prophetic traditions of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And as I said, when Jahm ibn Safwan, it is mentioned concerning this individual who appeared with, again, supporting this notion of pantheism or similar doctrines, somebody asked him, he was asked a question, and he was not known to sit with the scholars and learn Islam from the classical sources. He was akin to a philosopher. So somebody met him and asked him, describe for us your Lord. Who do you worship? And it said that he confided himself to his house because he was confused by the question. And he appeared and he said that the air that you see, this is God. God is everything and he's with everything. It's a state of disbelief, and that is one of the reasons why Al-Bukhari felt it necessary to mention in his authentic collection of hadith, which is the most authentic collection of hadith that exists, the book of At-Tawheed, to clarify the true meaning of At-Tawheed. Because if we look in the Quran, and again, this is for Muslims and non-Muslims, we find this message is so clear. A verse that I'll mention is Surah Al-Hajj. And Allah, he said, Ya ayyuhan nas, duriba mathal. O mankind, an example has been given for you. Fastami'u lah. Listen to it. Inna alladhina tad'una min dunillah. Those who you supplicate to besides Allah, lan yakhluqu dhubaba. They cannot and they will never be able. Lan, you feel the ta'bid, meaning they will never be able to create a fly. Walau ijtama'u lah. Even if they gather together and unite to achieve this. And atheism, Paul, is just a sophisticated, model of nature worship. But if we study this verse, and this is again a call to Tawheed, if we affirm our belief in God, like you said, some Christians, they say, God is one. If you affirm your belief in God, then at the same time, then you have to supplicate to him alone and you have to worship him alone. Worship is something in this as an example, because worship, supplication is highlighted as an example of worship because it's one of the greatest forms of worship, one of the most obvious forms of worship. But it's applicable to every other act of worship, whether it be prayer, whether it be sacrifice, whether it be vows or anything else. So in this verse, O mankind, an example is being given for you. Listen to it. Open your heart, because if you do not open your heart, it is like trying to insert a key into a lock that has been sealed. It will never penetrate. So open your ears and open your hearts and pay attention to it. Inna alladhina tad'una min dunillah. Those that you supplicate to besides Allah, lan yakhluqu dhubaba. They will never be able to create a fly, even if they all gather together to achieve this goal. وَإِن يَسْلُبْهُمُ الذُّبَابُ شَيْئًا. And if the fly was to steal something from them, food or some of their drink, they would never be able to return it. ضَعْفُ الطَّالِ وَالْمَطْلُوبِ. The seeker and the one who is sought from, they are both weak and incapable. And if you reflect over this, Paul, this is applicable to human beings, whether they are prophets. Prophet Muhammad said, I do not possess for myself the ability to harm or the ability to benefit. This is applicable to angels, because angels cannot create. This is applicable to the dead in the grave, the righteous. This is applicable to idols, a statue or a cross. They cannot create, even a fly, even if all of them were to gather together. So therefore, what does this necessitate? That we supplicate to the sole creator, who the Christian says, I believe in God. Then supplicate to God, worship God alone, and forsake all false deities and all forms of worship of other than God.
But just on that point about intercession or tawassul, as it's sometimes called, and there's some Muslims and others who happens in Catholicism, of course, where people call on Mary and the saints, of course, but there are Shia scholars and others who justify its permissibility, it seems, calling on the name of Muhammad and the Ahl Bayt, the family of the Prophet, and using those names as intercessors or intermediaries to God. So why is that not permitted as a means of intercession, do you think?
Because the verses of the Quran are clear. The verses of the Quran are clear. And just to, again, emphasize this point, it's the same as it relates to Christianity. We quoted the verse in Deuteronomy. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. However, people came after Jesus and distorted this message to the extent that some believe in the Trinity. You have Christians who worship the cross, which is idolatry, and other false practices. Likewise, you will have people who ascribe to Islam, Muslims, who will also unfortunately distort the message, sometimes because of misunderstandings, sometimes because of social predicaments, societal influences, sometimes because of economic gains and worldly motives. A simple response to that, Paul, is if we look in the Quran, we will not find one verse where God tells us to call upon any intermediary. Not one verse. Rather, we find قَالَ رَبُّكُمُ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Your Lord said, supplicate to me and I will answer you. Meaning him alone. Supplicate and I will answer you. And for example,
sorry, I was just saying in Surah Fatiha, which you already quoted in the 5th verse, it says, and this is recited at least 17 times a day for Muslims who pray 5 times a day, you alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help for every. I mean, it's in Surah Fatiha.
Excellent point. And just to further clarify as well, Paul, in the Arabic language, right, this word, Iyaka na'budu, is a beautiful arrangement of a sentence, a grammatical sentence. You know, there's so many benefits that just can be derived from the Arabic, right? Because the origin of this is na'buduka, right? We worship you. That's the origin, na'buduka. We worship you. However, in Arabic, sometimes, so this part, the kaf, it's not the mir muttasil. It is, you know, it's here, this na'buduka, we worship you. So the ka is you. However, when you take this particle, and I don't want to, you know, get into grammar too deep, but when you place it before the verb, so iyaka, now you've taken the ka and you've placed it before the verb, iyaka na'budu. There's a principle, taqdeemu ma haqquhu at-ta'khir yufid al-hasr, meaning now this is restricted to what is being mentioned, so it's only you and only you and no one but you we worship. So it's even emphasized further. So it's not like saying we worship you. It's saying you and only you we worship. You and only you we seek your aid. And again, in Surah Al-Baqarah, we find verses which are similar to what we've mentioned, commanding us to supplicate to God alone. Many verses. And that he's near with his knowledge. And he answers the supplications of those who call upon him. And again, I challenge anyone, whether they attach themselves to the Sufi orientation, whether they attach themselves to the Shiite orientation and understanding, bring me one verse. It's simple. Between us and you is the book of Allah. Between us and you is the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Because our allegiance should be around the truth. Our allegiance should be concerning the truth, because the haqq is the goal of every Muslim. Bring me one verse. One verse in the Quran where God commands us to call upon others as an intermediary.
I can think of some responses. I mean, I'm obviously not an expert, but I can think of a couple of responses. Obviously, during the Prophet's own lifetime, people asked him for intercession, that he, you know, they, oh Prophet, please pray for me. So that's a form of intercession, is it not? And also on the day of judgment, or the day of resurrection, is it not the case that the Prophet will then intercede before God for the Ummah?
See, Paul, again, let's again go back to the question, the first question I posed. I'm going to deal with that. Again, bring one verse. They will never be able to bring one verse. So we've dealt with that. You can't bring a verse where God tells us to call upon others as intermediaries.
No,
call upon him.
I accept that. Yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So we've established that. Therefore, God commands us in numerous verses to call upon him alone, like you said, Surah Al-Fatiha.
Yeah.
With regards to what the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, people went to him when he was alive to supplicate to God. It's allowed. However, when the Prophet is dead, when he died, what did the companions say? Man kana ya'budu Muhammadan, inna Muhammadan qad mat. Whoever worships Muhammad, Muhammad is dead, because nobody worships Muhammad. Asking a righteous man to supplicate who is living, that is allowed. He's living, supplicate to God for God to bless me with a child. Supplicate to God, we're experiencing drought. We don't have any rain, that he gives us rain. That person is living. He can turn and he supplicates to God, and God may answer his supplication. Obviously, we know God answered the supplications of the prophets and the messengers. However, when a person is dead, the companions, they said, and whoever worship Allah, then Allah Azza wa Jal, he never dies, he is ever living. The clear proof. We do not find any of the companions calling upon Prophet Muhammad. Again, give us one narration where any of the companions went to the Prophet and called upon the Prophet to intercede with God on their behalf. This is known as what? You're supplicating to someone who is dead. Innaka mayyit, Allah said in the Quran, Innaka mayyitun wa innahum mayyitun. You, Muhammad, you will die like they will die. The Prophet is dead. So therefore, if the Prophet is dead, we cannot supplicate to him. We cannot go to his grave and sacrifice for him, because this is shirk. And there's a verse in the Quran when this is likewise, it is addressed. When Allah said, Ala lillahi din al-khalis, to Allah belongs the pure religion, meaning all worship. Walladina, and those ittakhadu min dunihi awliya, and those who they take others as partners besides Allah. They say what? Again, this is clear. They say, Ma na'buduhum illa liyuqarribuna ila Allahi zulfa. They have the same argument, Paul. Allah tells us in the Quran, in Surah Az-Zumar, they say we do not worship them. We don't worship the dead. We don't worship the idols. We don't worship Jesus. But we do not worship them except that they bring us closer to Allah, closer to God. We take them as intermediaries. إِلَّا لِيُقَرِّبُونَ إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفَى. And again, these arguments are the same arguments that the polytheists of Quraysh were using, the pagan Arabs. Some of the arguments are the same arguments that will be mentioned by some Christians.
Oh, they are. This whole debate, coming from a Christian background, when I first encountered this discussion, these issues that we're discussing now in an Islamic context, were completely familiar. I'd heard exactly the same arguments before between Catholics and Protestants. Protestants advance precisely the same arguments. Obviously, they're not quoting the Quran, but the same principles. Look, you can't call on Mary; she's dead. Yeah, I mean, we should worship God alone. Although for them, of course, that includes Jesus. But nevertheless, the same principle is there in intra-Christian arguments and dialogue very much today still. So it's interesting how that works. But then the second point is, of course, am I not right in thinking that on the day of resurrection, the day of judgment, the Prophet Muhammad himself will intercede for the Ummah on the Ummah's behalf before God? So it's not like intercession is always wrong. It can happen when he's alive, when he was in Mecca and Medina 1400 years ago, and it will happen again in the end times in the afterlife. Is that right?
Yes, shafa'ah, intercession. Yes, there are types of intercession that are affirmed in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. But also there are types of intercession that are forbidden and are considered as shirk. one form of intercession that is forbidden and is considered to be shirk is calling upon the dead and asking them to intercede with God on your behalf. That is forbidden, and it is clearly shirk. Intercession that you mentioned, Paul, with regards even to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, God will give him permission to intercede. God will give him permission to intercede. But intercede for who, Paul? This is a crucial factor. Only intercession will be granted for those who worship Allah alone and fulfill Tawheed. Those who call upon the prophets and the dead, they will not be granted intercession. Because there's a verse, Ayat al-Kursi. Who can intercede with God except by his permission? So God has to give permission. God has to firstly be pleased with the one who is interceding. Yes, Prophet Muhammad can intercede, but also the one for whom intercession is sought. He has to be a person that lived upon a Tawheed and died upon a Tawheed. And intercession, as we have clarified, yes, there is that which is affirmed and also that which is negated. Mm-hmm. And that which is negated is seeking intermediaries, like you say, going through an intermediary to go to God, calling upon the dead and the like of these things. This is clearly shirk, it's polytheism, and like you said, the same arguments and the same reasoning can be found amongst Christians. And it is shared amongst those who try to justify saint worship and the likes of these paganistic practices, which have nothing to do with Islam. And the thing about it, Paul, if we look, I just want to as well highlight this point, is that humans are born equal, regardless of color, class, lineage, in the sense that every child is born with al-Fitra, an innate disposition to acknowledge God and believe in him. And if they were left without any, influences, societal influences from society or their parents, then they would worship that God alone without any partners. They would worship God alone without any partners. And this is Tawheed, also is the essence of justice as it relates to fulfilling God's rights, but also as it relates to fulfilling the rights. It results in fulfilling the rights of one another. If you look at it, right, humans are born without purpose. That's a lie. Tawheed tells us we were born with a purpose. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create the jinn nor mankind except to worship me alone. Secondly, there is a chosen people based upon lineage. So you can do as you please, but if you belong to a particular race or a particular clan, then you are chosen. This is rejected because inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The best of you before God are the most pious, those who are most devout, those who worship God alone and perform righteous deeds for him alone. Likewise, humans are born, this understanding of Tawheed, it rejects the idea that humans are born sinful and can only be ransomed through a blood sacrifice. Because no, actually humans, as we find in the Quran, when Allah, he said, فِطْرَةُ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. فِطْرَةُ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. That every, Allah, he creates mankind upon that fitra, that natural, innate disposition to believe in him. لا تبديل لخلق الله. So Tawheed, yes, it is justice in affirming the rights of Allah, but it results also in fulfilling the rights of the creation. And that is why when Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was sent at a time of ignorance, it was known as al-Jahiliyyah, darkness, pagan practices, idolatry. There was so many idols at the Kaaba. People were making tawaf naked, immorality, indecency. They were drinking alcohol, fornication was rampant, slavery, oppression of the weak. Slavery was there, and the slave had no rights. The slave had no dignity. Look at something, Paul, which is very important. How this innate disposition of certain individuals was so strong, even they were in, the bonds of slavery, like Bilal. When they heard this, say none has the right to be worshipped in truth except Allah, except God, alone without any partners. Even though they were in the bonds of slavery, they accepted it. To the extent that he was dragged through the streets of Mecca and he would say, Ahadun Ahad, as we find in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. He is one. God is one in his lordship, in his names and attributes, and in his right to be worshipped alone. And that is why, King Najashi, when he heard it, when the arrogance, the veil of arrogance is removed from the heart, a person hears the message of Islam, which is the message of every prophet and messenger, and they gravitate towards it. And that's why I remember there was a researcher at the University of Oxford Center for Anthropology. I think his name was Justin Barrett. And he said that scientific evidence for the last 10 years has proven that there is a predisposition in children's minds to see the natural world as designed and purposeful. And that some kind of intelligent being, that there is some kind of intelligent being that is behind this purpose. This is the Fitra. And even atheists, some atheists, even though their arrogance, dictates to them to reject it, and maybe they don't know actually what they're saying, they say that, I think Dawkins was one of them, when he said that, yes, we do find there is a pull, to look at the universe and, to basically come to the conclusion that this is created and there are laws and regulations and so on and so forth, and to turn to religion. That is the Fitra, even though he would, obviously he would deny it. But this Fitra is, it is like something that is pure. And when the message of the prophets comes and waters it, it is able to grow. And that is why even in this time, Paul, there's so many challenges with regards to, we're in a pandemic, COVID, the world, issues of race, issues of morality. There are so many disputes and disagreements and differences, even in one country where you have people on the right and people on the left, and in the middle, we still find people, materialism, affluenza. The world is more, richer than it's ever been before. There are, obviously, with social media and the internet, there are more diversions and, distractions than ever. But we still find people entering the religion of Islam in amazing numbers. Why? Because they have the innate disposition. That message, it waters that Fitra. Likewise, we have sound logic. The verses we gave, some of them we highlighted. Even as it relates to, the Quran, it calls us to use our reason, our ability to reason. Like for Christians, Allah said in the Quran, in Surah Ali Imran, Inna mathala Isa inda Allahi ka mathali Adam, khalaqahu min turabin thumma qala lahu kun fayakun, al-haqqu min rabbika fala takun min al-mumtareen. Verily the like of Jesus before Allah is the like of Adam. Use your reason. Why are you saying Jesus is the Son of God? Because he doesn't have a father? Okay, based upon your logic, then Adam does not have a mother or a father. So what do you say about him? What do you say concerning him? And God created Adam from earth. And then he said, be, and he was. And this is the truth from your Lord. So do not be somebody that doubts. So we find God calling and use our logic or intellect to understand the truth that we find innately within us. So, like I said, this is something that is obvious for Muslims and non-Muslims, and it is something that has been established, without a shadow of a doubt, that Tawheed, the right of God to be worshipped alone without any partners, and if you believe in his lordship, that he alone created, that he alone provides and sustains, that he alone controls everything, then you must believe likewise that he alone is to be worshipped. And also you must believe, and this is for, from a different angle, that he has beautiful names and perfect attributes. And from his names is Al-Alim, the all-knowing. And from his names is the all-wise, Al-Hakim. So if you believe in God, then you believe that God is all-knowing and that your knowledge is limited. And if you believe in God, you believe that God is the all-wise and he has the perfect attribute of wisdom, and that your wisdom is limited based upon your intelligence, based upon your experiences, based upon how long you live, based upon what you have witnessed, based upon the influence of society at that time. But at the same time, when God legislates something, it is not for me or you to try and object to that, or to try and distort it, or to try and change it. If we believe in God.
I think that's a really important point, actually, there, and it's quite a radical point, because we believe in the West that, based on statistical majorities, we can decide, for example, that two men can get married, or or that there are many different genders, or whatever. We can look to our wisdom and our knowledge, and we can just decide these by statistical majority and legislate for these for our children and for our society. But you're saying, actually, one of the outworkings of Tawheed, this right of God to be worshipped alone, and his names and attributes, you mentioned that he's all-knowing and all-wise and so on, that in fact the obvious answer then is to turn to God, or turn to Allah for our wisdom and our guidance, because he knows perfectly all things. And to disregard that guidance is the ultimate kind of hubris then on behalf of mankind, the ultimate arrogance that we should disregard Tawheed, disregard his perfect wisdom and knowledge and so on. So there is something rotten at the heart of our system which disregards that guidance and knowledge, which, as you say, is implicit in our Fitra, in our innate sense of the createdness of the universe, and that there is a creator, a single God. So Tawheed is not just, what I'm trying to say here, that Tawheed is not just a theological abstraction. It's not like just an idea in the people's heads. It has social and political, legal, moral, existential outworkings for humanity. And that's why there's no secularism, I think, in Islam, because there is no space beyond God's control.
Tawheed, like you said, Tawheed is a way of life. And, the thing about it is that, some, secularists or atheists or agnostics, they basically want to portray religion as outdated and something that is for the medieval past. And in reality, the answer to these people is that, yes, also you worship something and you have a religion, and we find this in the Quran. أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهُ هَوَاهُ. Do you see take their desires as God's? Allah. Meaning their opinions, or like you said, their conclusions based upon whether it's statistical data or other than that, they believe that this is absolutely the truth, and nothing else can be accepted other than that. So in reality, for them, it's a religion, and to differ with them, they consider you, that you are associating partners, with their God, which is their intellects and their desires and their opinions that they have invented. Whereas as Muslims, we say, let's look at religion, and let's have a discussion. And we are all human beings, and we're going to treat one another with respect, and we're going to interact respectfully. But, in the world that we live, in the countries that we live, whether it's the United Kingdom, whether it's America, whether it's Europe, we say that one of the things that we cherish is freedom of speech and freedom of opinion. That's one of the things that they say that they cherish in these lands. So let's cherish, and let's open the forum for discussions, and not just, basically you look at religion like, the decoration that goes on the date,
Exactly.
It's decoration, but it has no substance to it, and the thing meaningful.
Yes, it's very much a private.
It's a private affair.
But you sometimes, you may be public on a Sunday, you may go to church for an hour, and that's kind of your public commitment. But it's very much a private thing, and in places like France, it really is militantly pushed into the private realm. And lo and if you even say that faith, religion, God has any role whatsoever, and you'll be anathematized and even criminalized. It's happened, unfortunately, with some mosques in France that have been closed by the state in the recent months.
I think that's one of the reasons why, Paul, that we have so many problems in the world today, where we believe that man has the answer for everything, and basically anything that we find in religion is to be rejected or looked down upon. I mean, let's just take examples. The opioid level of opioid addiction, overdoses is alarming. Islam, prohibits the usage of any drug, even alcohol. Look at, how, alcohol addiction, how it basically has crippled the NHS, and, Friday, Saturday nights, the burden on the NHS system because of how many fights and other events that result from people being drunk. These are things that, if we're going to be honest, let's be honest and say, Islam, that's a very beautiful law and a very beautiful regulation that we find in the religion of Islam. And other practices, like, for example, I'll give another example. When we found like the Me Too movement, right? So that's another example. People prior to that, people used to say, oh, Muslims. I remember, I think there was a case in Europe where you had an individual Muslim, he had his religious beliefs, and he said, I don't shake the hands of women who are not my, relatives. And that's just, I know I'm not being offensive to you. And I think that's practiced by some Orthodox Jews, if I'm not mistaken. I was informed.
It is.
Right. So I think they refused to give that person citizenship based upon that. He wasn't disrespectful, like, it's you, and it was like, basically, this is my religious practice. It's ironic that after the Me Too movement, you have business bosses, multi-millionaires, billionaires saying, if I avoid now going to dinner with a woman alone, I don't shake the hands of a woman. Everyone was in a mass state of paranoia, and nobody came back and said, this is misogyny. Why won't you shake the hand of a woman? You see the double standards. It's the same as, in the UK, you have politicians. When it came time for an election, who do we isolate and demonize? The minority Muslim population who already are, having issues with Islamophobia because they're trying to convince everyone that, listen, we are peaceful. And that's the statistics, again, supports the fact that the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful. Otherwise, there would be chaos in the earth. But Muslims had to prove their identity even to people that they were born. Some Muslims born in the UK. Others may have, have come from overseas, but they had to, again, reassert their identity. Hey, it's me, I'm Hassan. I'm the person you've known all your life. We went to the same school. I haven't changed. I'm not going to harm you. But in that type of climate, we would have expected from politicians to reassure the public, but not utilize the issue of niqab when you have politicians because they felt that, there was a challenging election taking place, or, you have to take off your niqab because how can I communicate with you when I can't see your face, right? Comparing women, as a niqab to a letterbox. However, if I said now, and I said, I'm wearing, take off your mask because I find it's rude that you cover your face, even though it's for medical reasons. But still, if it's allowed for medical reasons, why can't it be if the person themselves, as a woman, she makes that decision? She's not forced. She says, I make this decision and nobody's influencing me. It's something I want to do. Why are they demonized and somebody that wears a mask isn't? It's just so many contradictions. And again, there's a movement to, again, religion, to demonize religion and to make it, unappealing and not palatable for the masses. But I mean, it's backfiring because the more they speak about Islam, the more people go out and purchase, the translation of the meaning of the Quran, the more that people look into the Prophet Muhammad, and many people are embracing Islam, men and women from all walks of life after they look into it and they, investigate it. So, I mean, they think they're, doing a disservice, but in reality, they've done a service.
Yeah, it can backfire in that sense. From their point of view, people then look into the religion as I did and learn new realities which they had never heard of before. But and this has been noticed even by right-wing commentators like Douglas Murray, the British conservative writer, in his recent book, The Suicide of Europe, that he was very clear, and he's an atheist, and he doesn't like Islam at all. But he says Europe has lost its soul, it's lost its way, it no longer knows what it's about. Why does Europe bother to exist anymore? It has no purpose and no meaning. And he laments the faith that he lost. He's no longer a Christian. The faith that Europe once had when it used to believe in God and when it had a Christian moral code of a kind. So even right-wing Islamophobes nevertheless recognize the problem, don't have an answer, because he's quite clear in his book he doesn't have an answer. But Muslims come along and say, well, this is the faith of Abraham. This is Tawheed. This is the monotheism preached by Abraham and by Jesus and by Muhammad, peace be upon them all. So Muslims are left just the only ones left in the room standing, basically, who are preaching this old time religion. The churches, well, won't go into that. You know, that they're in free fall in terms of decline and obsolescence and marginalization, particularly in Britain, of course. The Anglican Church is virtually extinct now. So Muslims find themselves as the only upholders, I think, of the old faith of the prophets, the faith of Jesus, the faith of Muhammad. And that's interesting. And that's the future. And people like Douglas Murray and others have got to come to terms with that, actually, because it's not going to go away.
Yes, I think that as well, that if you were to look as well at, Muslim countries, the UAE, for example, Paul, and I just saw some, I think it was a news report. They said that globally, I think it's one of the safest places for women, to walk in the evening.
Right.
And again, why is that? Because obviously, yes, the UAE, we're not saying that any country is perfect, but at the same time, yes, you see that Islam, the adhan is made, you hear the adhan, the call to prayer, people identify as being Muslim, people are trying to adhere to the religion, and you see that these laws and regulations that come from Islam has a benefit for society. That, a Muslim country, how many people actually, take the time to reflect over that when there, alarming levels of rape in Western countries, and also we find, sexual abuse and with the Me Too movement, which actually revealed what I think everyone either, knew or had an idea that was taking place. But, these type of things, people, why is that? It's because the way that Islam has legislated certain laws and certain regulations for the benefit of society. And not saying that Muslims are not perfect. You have Muslims that are religious and you have Muslims that are irreligious. You have good Muslims and you have bad Muslims. However, the religion Islam itself, Islam, we believe as Muslims, it is the religion of God, and we believe as a religion it is perfect. And we believe that when things are legislated, it's for the benefit of mankind, either absolute benefit or, the benefit outweighs any harm. And likewise, when something is prohibited, because harm is an absolute harm or it's an overall harm, even though there may be a small amount of benefit. And, and again, you see the benefit of these things in some of the Muslim lands. Yes, and there are challenges. Nobody can deny that there are challenges. And a lot of these challenges that we find in Muslim countries, they're political. Has nothing to do with religion. It's political, and it's influenced by, the political setup of the region at this moment in time. But I think that if we want to, for non-Muslims, know about the religion of Islam, like Paul, he showed me earlier, he has a copy of the Noble Quran just in English. If you want to know about Islam, read about the biography of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And also, if you want to go to know about Islam, go and introduce yourself to, a community of Muslims that, are maybe in your locality, and see the positive contributions that they're having to the society around them. And even here, for example, in Philadelphia, at this moment in time, sadly, the murder rate is at very high levels. I think we've already passed, or we've just reached 500 murders, in a city the size of Philadelphia, which is worrying. And women are being killed, and even children sadly have been killed because they've been caught in the line of fire. And you find many of the Muslim communities are involved trying to counter this, wave of violence. I mean, the community that I'm present in at the moment actually paid for security for the Muslim businesses and the non-Muslim businesses, on the avenue, to try and help with, the safety and the security of everyone, because safety and security is something that we should all enjoy. So I'm sure there are many examples, and that's just one small example, and there are many others. I'm sure there are many examples where Muslims are contributing and aiding in the societies that they reside. Paul, it's time for our prayer dhuhr here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would love to stay and talk all day.
It's Maghrib here, just gone. Okay, well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. You've been talking for exactly an hour, so much food for thought there. By the way, your website, your masjid website, what is the address for that?
Yes, the address for the masjid website is germantownmasjid.com, germantownmasjid.com.
And I know, having had a look at that, there's quite a lot of resources there about Islam and about extremism and other issues as well. So that's a place to have a look for further information about this. So thank you very much indeed, Shaykh Hasan Somali, for your precious time and talking about such a central and important subject as Tawheed. So is there anything in conclusion you just want to say before we end?
No, I think, in closing, I would encourage non-Muslims to try and get hold of a book known as The Meaning of Islam, which has been published in the UK and likewise in the US, which is a very basic explanation of what Islam is. And if you would like a copy, maybe we can try and get Paul, maybe we can try and have an email that we can provide you with later on. And whether you're in the UK or whether in the US, we can try and get you a copy of this book so that you can read more and have at least an accurate understanding of what Islam is and what Islam stands for. For the Muslims, I would encourage them to, learn more about, Tawheed, because it is the first obligation and it is the last obligation. One of the scholars, classical scholars, that is widely accepted amongst many of the Sunni Muslims, At-Tahawi, he started his book Aqidah Tahawiyya. When he said, "Naqulu fi tawhidillahi mu'taqidina bi tawfiqillahi," that he said we start by saying that believing in the Tawheed of Allah, and we believe in this, and Allah has granted us success to do so. That, and he started with a Tawheed. And this is the first obligation, and it is the last obligation. It is the first obligation, it is the last obligation. It is something that we must learn about and something that we must actualize in our lives. And as we said, At-Tahawi said, "Naqulu fi tawhidillahi mu'taqidina bi tawfiqillahi, inna Allaha wahidun la sharika lah, wa la shay'a mithlah." That we start by saying, concerning the Tawheed of Allah, and this is what we believe in, and Allah has granted us success to do this. Inna Allaha wahid la sharika lah. Allah, God is one, and He has no partners. Wa la shay'a mithluhu, and there is nothing like Him. So this is the first obligation, and this is the last obligation. It is not enough just for us to say that, we are Muslims and believe that we are chosen, and regardless of what we do. No, we have to actualize this in our life. The kalima, la ilaha illallah, none has the right to be worshipped in truth except Allah, except God. And if we actualize it and we die upon it, then for us is paradise. And again, I thank you for having me, Paul, and I'll stop there. Wa subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you very much. Until next time. Bye-bye.